The Washington Post reported that a security camera captured a building collapsing on January 15, 2020, right after two people were crossing the street from that location. A fire truck arrived moments after the collapse because it was returning to the firehouse that's 2 blocks away. The collapse of the two-story building in DC's Trinidad neighborhood was caught on a security camera of Andy Felicoti, who lives across the street from the building. Felicoti shared the footage of the incident from his security video on Twitter, showing the partial collapse of the empty store at 1102 Staples Street Northeast and Florida Avenue. The video shows two people crossing the street near the building as its facade slowly peels away and crashes to the ground in a cloud of dust. The fire truck that seemed to appear almost instantaneously was on its way back to the fire station after a call, the DC Fire Department said on its Twitter page. Neither emergency crew nor construction contractor could immediately say why the front of the building fell down. Vito Maggiolo, a spokesman for DC's Fire and Emergency Medical Services Department, said that the collapse happened at 1:30 p.m. and that crews were on the scene for about 2 hours. They used a search dog to check whether anybody was trapped underneath the rubble, and they did not find anybody. Emergency personnel and DC's Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs were called to the scene of the collapse, and they were able to eliminate any immediate danger to the adjacent buildings. The building itself still remains unstable, said Maggiolo. The building was sold September 2019 for $1.8 million, according to property records, and in the following month, the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs issued permits for a renovation project that would create an 18-unit apartment building. The construction was projected to cost another $1 million, according to a contract filed with the department. Maggiolo said the Regulatory Affairs Department will be handling the follow-up investigation of the collapse. Utku Alanzturk, whose company Delia Construction is listed as the contractor for the project, and he has said he was still trying to figure out why the facade had collapsed. As Lanturk is also listed as the contact for the limited liability company that owns the property. A passerby was hit by debris from the building, said the fire department spokesman, and that person was treated for a minor injury. Public radio station WAMU 88.5 FM reports that the owner of DC building that collapsed failed to install covered walkway on the sidewalk. City documents now show that the owner of the building did not install a covered walkway on that very stretch of the sidewalk that he said he would, increasing the likelihood that pedestrians below could be injured. The covered walkway, which would have run along the side of the property facing Florida Avenue, was included in a traffic control plan submitted by the owner with their documents to convert the 2-story commercial building into a 4-story 18-unit residential building. Traffic control plans are submitted to DC's Department of Transportation, especially when construction is expected to occupy public space. In this case, instead of closing the sidewalk, which would only be approved of as a last resort, the owner said they would put up a covered walkway, which would have protected pedestrians from any fallen debris from the construction site. Here's an example of a covered walkway and how it attaches to the construction site. The sidewalk on the Staples Street side of the building was partially blocked off with a chain-link fence, but the covered walkway along the Florida Avenue side was never built, and the threat of falling debris became very real on January 15, 2020, when the facade suddenly broke off from the building and fell to the ground. The building is owned and being converted by Dyla Development and Construction. In an email statement, an attorney from the company said, "The work that was done on the building was done legally. The owner is still reviewing and working with all necessary agencies in DC to ensure the safety and stabilization of the site." The owner performed work in accordance with permits issued and is working with the appropriate agencies to ensure that the work is completed safely after this unfortunate incident. But Lauren Stevens, a spokeswoman for DDOT, said the city has issued Dyla Development notice of violation, which brings with it a fine. This traffic control plan was submitted but never paid for or installed, so the contractor was occupying public space illegally, said Mrs. Stevens in an email. And the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs has issued the company a stop work order for illegal construction on the property. An official with knowledge of the situation said the order was issued to stop any further work on the site while plans for the building are revised, and that a covered walkway would ultimately be installed along the sidewalk. The incident ties to a broader debate that has been happening across DC in recent years over accommodations for pedestrians and cyclists when construction projects take up public space, primarily sidewalks and bike lanes. In 2014, DC started enforcing a law more strictly requiring that developers and contractors provide alternate routes around the area when they block sidewalks or bike lanes. But advocates say that enforcement can still be spotty. A Ward 1 resident who has pushed for safer accommodations more consistently is John Renault, and he has said DC made up some pretty specific guidelines, and they're never followed even when DDOT goes out to enforce it, which only happens when people complain enough. Other advocates also say that the building's owner is to blame. Pedestrians around our city already face a variety of safety risks, says Priscilla McGee, a member of DC Pedestrian Advisory Council, who offers official guidance and insight to DC government on pedestrian-related issues. Ms. McGee also said, for this developer to provide such inadequate safety measures to protect those passing by is completely unacceptable. DDOT officials say they plan to crack down on companies that don't offer pedestrians and bicyclists a safe passage near and around work zones in the city. DDOT has also released new rules requiring companies to provide safe accommodations for people on foot and on two wheels around construction sites. The rules would enforce provisions in the Bicycle Safety Amendment Act of 2013. The new rules clarify that the closing of a sidewalk or bicycle lane is to be treated in the same manner as the closure of a lane of travel. Under these suggested regulations, when a work zone blocks a protected bike lane, an alternate bike lane must be provided. The temporary pedestrian and bicycle routes have to have a safe and free of obstructions and surface hazards, such as loose gravel or uneven surfaces. And they also should follow the same path of the original pedestrian or bicycle route as closely as possible. The owner of the building, DCRA, and DDOT were invited to a meeting where Donald Sullivan, DCRA's program manager for vacant building and illegal construction, was the only one to attend the meeting, and he did his best to explain what led to the collapse. On January 15th, a portion of the building buckled under its own weight because excavation work had gone too deep without enough underpinning installed to support that work. While it's not clear why excessive digging was done that day, the construction team was completing its underpinning work according to the plans approved by the DCRA. Unfortunately, the lack of structural support expedited gravity, quote unquote, and led to the building collapsing. Sullivan noted that while the incident should not have happened, the building fell in the best possible way, noting that there were workers beneath the building at the time of the collapse and that it was lucky that there weren't any fatalities. Sullivan and other structural engineers removed the imminent danger hazard by dismantling part of the roof, part of the building, removed debris from the collapse, and put up fencing and barricades, and lastly, issued a stop work order. The following week, DCRA found no anomalies in the plans after review. DDOT and the Department of Energy and Environment were also involved in evaluating the public space permits and for environmental hazards. To Sullivan's recollection, DCRA's construction plans did not require a covered walkway on the sidewalks adjacent to the building because the construction was not adding any floors, although he could not speak to whether DDOT's public space review required a covered walkway. Sullivan confirmed that residents should call 311 if they are concerned about any building work that they see because resident inspectors can be dispatched in 24 hours. So far, DCRA has given 3 fines against the development team, and there may be additional fines moving forward, said Sullivan. Now, the building is permitted to become a 14-unit, 4-story building. So what happened to the Staple Street Market since January 2020? I found my answer when I was traveling down Florida Avenue recently. I stopped and I had to take a picture of the new building standing there. It looked like it's 5 stories, including a basement. I wonder if anybody moved in yet. I also wonder how much does each apartment cost. Are they selling each apartment as a condo or are they renting it? I wrote myself a note to look it up when I got back home. So when I got home and went online, I found this real estate website saying the property sold for $1 and it has no bedrooms and no bathrooms. It has central AC and heat, but it doesn't have any water. Now, you know you can't rent out an apartment in DC without water. So now I'm thinking, I must have mistook the person sitting on the front step as a resident of the building. I need to go back and find out, is this building occupied? So I went back days later and I looked into some of the windows and it didn't seem like anybody was in there. I walked around the side and there was a locked gate around the side entrance, and the mailbox has 13 slots for 13 units. The larger boxes had external keys, which meant they were for large deliveries. Then I walked up to one of the glass doors. Then I saw it, a vacant property notice. The sign reads, DCRA Vacant Building Enforcement Unit has inspected your property and deemed it to be vacant. DC Official Code 42-3131 requires all property owners or agents to complete and submit a vacant building response form within 30 days from the date of this notice. If you fail to submit the form within 30 days, your property will be designated as vacant and reclassified accordingly. The date on this notice was washed away with the rain, so I couldn't tell how old it was. So I looked up the rules for a DC vacant property to find out what the big deal was. I found a list of frequently asked questions online, and the first question is, what properties have to be registered? The answer is, vacant unoccupied property for 30 days or more as defined by DC's Title 42. Real property must be registered. What is the purpose of registering vacant property? Answer: to identify and account for unoccupied property which protects the health, safety, and welfare of the general public. Vacant properties can be a cause and source of blight. Registering vacant properties persuades the owner to come into compliance, especially when the owner fails to actively maintain, preserve, and manage the property to ensure that it does not become a nuisance to the community. What constitutes a vacant property? Any property that is unoccupied, properly registered, and meets the vacant property conditions will be cited and issued a vacant property sticker. Unregistered property may also be considered vacant if the property is unoccupied, not registered, or subject to an exemption. When must a property owner register a vacant property? When a residential or commercial property has been vacant for more than 30 days, it must be registered. How much does it cost to register a vacant property? The annual registration fee is $250. Who must register a vacant or abandoned property? The owner or agent of the property has the duty to register each vacant property. What are the penalties for not registering a vacant property? Any person who violates any provision of the municipal regulation will be fined not less than $1,000 and not more than $2,000 for each offense. What if my property becomes legally occupied? A property may be removed from the registration list by providing proof of sale or written notice and proof of occupancy to DCRA. The registration fee is neither prorated nor refundable. I don't know what problems this building has, but it does seem like the owner can't get any units sold or rented, so it remains empty and costing the owner more registration fees. Now that I'm looking around this area, that reminds me, wasn't there a bar next to this building? What happened to it? I'll have to do a part 2 to this video and look that up. I'll keep you updated if anybody moves into the 1102 Staple Street building, and I found out more about the building that was next to it. So if you'd like to support me and my channel, hit the support me button on my channel banner or click the link in my About Me page. Subscribe to my channel to find out more events and history going on in my hometown of Washington, D.C. I want to thank you for hanging out with me. I'm Dickie D in DC, and I will see you in the next video.